So we are live, Alan, and people are jumping on. So I'm really grateful to you for giving me the time. I know we've only got 25 minutes max because you have a podcast to do. So I'm just going to get right into it. Are we living in 1984? And I ask you that, let's kick off, so many things to talk about. But Harvard, where you taught at the law school for over 50 years, is the Trump administration in danger of coming off like the thought police? What is your view on what's going on here? Is Harvard right to fight back?
We are living both in 1934 and 1984. We're living in 1934 when universities, the greatest universities in the world, the University of Munich, the University of Heidelberg, the University of Berlin, were excluding students because they were Jewish. And Harvard University, under its then president, was welcoming Nazis to come to Harvard and was praising Nazi Germany. And we're seeing a great deal of that. We're seeing young students on campus today being supporters of Nazis. They call themselves Hamas today, but they're Nazis. I have a cartoon on my refrigerator which shows a young student home from college with a Hitler mustache and a swastika, and his mother and father saying to him, "We're really worried about what you're learning in college these days." So we're in 1934, and the reaction to 1934 may well be 1984. We live in a world of extremes where
Right.
never strike the appropriate balance. We overreact. And I think we're seeing some overreaction to what's going on at Harvard. Harvard is fighting back in an overreactive way. What's needed is some degree of compromise. What we need to do is abolish. The first thing we have to do is abolish DEI, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the most dangerous phenomenon that has hit colleges and universities since McCarthyism when I was a student in high school. What does DEI mean? It means lack of diversity. You only have diversity based on color of one's skin, but not on any kind of intellectual or ideological input. E is equity, which is the opposite of equality, and inclusion, which excludes Jews and Asians and many others. So that's number one. Number two, this plethora of new departments, sex studies, studies involving race, programs involving Native Americans. All of these departments and programs and studies must be abolished because they're not academic. Once you have a program for gay studies, it means you're advocating a particular lifestyle. It's a lifestyle I don't.
But Alan, shouldn't there be a line, right? Where, I mean, my understanding from the reports are that Harvard and the administration were in quite constructive talks around wiping out anti-Semitic behavior. And then there was a letter sent on Friday night with a list of demands that would have been, I think somebody said it made it easy in a way for Harvard to rebut them because they went too far. They said that the government would need to have an independent monitor, right, to check that Harvard was bringing in enough diversity of thought without explaining really what that diversity of thought even meant.
I agree with you. I think the letter went too far, and I think Harvard went too far in rejecting everything in the letter. There are things in the letter that were very good, and there were things in the letter that were not very good. I want you to just imagine going back to when I was in college in the 1950s, and the Supreme Court had just ruled that segregation was unlawful. Imagine a Southern college, Ole Miss, that didn't like that decision, and so it encouraged Klansmen to come on the campus wearing masks to harass Black students. It encouraged teachers to teach white supremacy. And then the Justice Department, the Ed Department said, you know what? We're going to withhold federal funding from Ole Miss unless it starts to deal with the racism that we see on campus. Barack Obama, if he had been around then, would have applauded that. And many of the people on the left who today are condemning what's going on at Harvard would have applauded that. So there are good aspects to the federal government trying to persuade colleges not to be racist or sexist or homophobic. But when it comes to defending the rights of Jews to equality, everything seems to switch. And somehow Jewish students, Zionist students, Christian students, conservative students are not entitled to the same protection from the federal government that black students and gay students and women students and others, everybody wants to see them entitled to. So I'd like to see the equal application. You know, people ask me all the time, how do you define anti-Semitism? It's very, very simple. A double standard. A double standard. You apply to Jewish students, you apply to the nation state of the Jewish people, Israel, a standard different than you apply to anybody else. And that's what we're seeing on university campuses. That's why the president of Harvard got fired, President Gay, because she was applying a different standard. You couldn't say things about
I understand, but I mean, I personally agree with what you said right at the beginning, that obviously, you know, things may have swung too far in one direction, and now there is a pushback that's possibly going from the government too far in the other direction, and then it raises very thorny questions around the First Amendment and free speech.
Not only
But we haven't got. And there are so many things going on regarding the law and the government right now that I want to sort of bang through them with you, because obviously big headlines today around this federal judge Boasberg, I don't know if I'm saying that right, who is suggesting that the government could be held in contempt of court for flying out the people it sent to El Salvador, and suggesting that they may have done so illegally. And I read that this would be a criminal contempt of court. And I read what he wrote, and I'm not a lawyer, but it's fairly startling, right? I mean, he's delivering these opinions, and the planes are taking off. And the government then comes back and says, well, you said something, but the plane took off in the half-hour difference between when you said they needed to turn around, and then you wrote your written order didn't mention turning the plane around, so therefore it was okay for us to take off. I mean, it seems, for lay people out there, this seems absurd, and something seems to have gone very badly wrong. So can you deconstruct it for us?
Yeah, things have gone wrong. There's been a lack of communications between the judiciary and the executive. The executive is pushing the envelope further than any president has since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the courts are pushing back. This whole contempt thing is Judge Boasberg's fault. He committed the worst sin that a judge can commit, and that is unclarity, lack of clarity, uncertainty. He says that the planes ought to turn back. He doesn't say when, how, and where. He doesn't say subject to safety considerations. Then he writes an opinion, and he doesn't say the planes have to be turned back. So there's no chance that there'll be a contempt order upheld against the Trump administration based on an inconsistent, vague ruling. Moreover, Judge Boasberg was not the right person to make this order. His daughter works for a living on behalf of immigrants and people who are potential deportees, and he's the worst person to have been picked to decide this case. Moreover, he was picked 4 times to go after the Trump administration, supposedly randomly from the hat. The statistical likelihood that one judge in a 25-judge court would be picked 4 times in a row is extremely unlikely. So what we see is not a crisis. We see a conflict between the judicial branch and the executive branch. We've had those before under Thomas Jefferson, under Abraham Lincoln, under Franklin Roosevelt. It's not a crisis. It would become a crisis, and it may become a crisis, if the Supreme Court says, Mr. Donald Trump, you must do X and you must do it by this time. And Trump says what Andrew Jackson said back in the 1920s, Mr. Chief Justice, you rendered the decision. Now you enforce it. I'm not going to do it. We're not there yet. We may get there. And if there is...
Right, because the Supreme Court did Right. They voided this order, right? But said that they used the word facilitate.
And they
Am I
also,
right?
yeah, there was also a great misunderstanding. The man from Maryland, who now has been apparently subject to court decisions involving beating up his wife, and he's not a good guy. This guy.
So this is a slightly different. This is one of the men, right, who was deported, and now there's an argument saying, well, it's emerged that he was mistakenly rounded up with everybody else, right? Because
Mistakenly rounded up. He wasn't mistakenly deported. He was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. That's the thing. What happened is he was subject to deportation, but a court had said that he was seeking asylum not to be sent back to El Salvador because he was
right,
being killed there. So if the government had sent him to Guatemala, there'd be no problem. Or to Mexico, there'd be no problem. He was not legally in the United States. He was illegally in the United States. They made a mistake. They sent him to El Salvador. They should bring him back. He should have a hearing in one day. They will find that he's not entitled to be subject to being kept in the United States on amnesty, and then he can be properly deported to a different country than El Salvador. So, yes, there was a mistake, but he's not somebody who has status of a lawful American citizen, unlike Khalil, the Columbia student, who was here under a green card. So,
right.
due process. What does due process mean? It means the process that is due to you based on what your status is and what you're charged with. If you're a citizen, your due process involves trial by jury, counsel, presumption of innocence. If you're a green card holder, you have a lesser degree of process due to you. If you're a student visa holder, you have virtually no due process. And if you're illegal, the way this man from Maryland was, then all you have to have is an opportunity to challenge where you're going, not whether you're going. So there.
But he's not. All right, let's take one at a time here. Mr. Abrego Garcia, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, he, as of now, the Trump administration is not saying they're going to bring him back and letting him have his moment in court. And you're saying actually they should.
I think they should. Now, whether they can be compelled to do it or not is a different question. They should do it. It would